Story 1. This was from some other Reddit user months back when this question was asked. It always stuck with me, though. You can tell when you are not interested in the little things that make them happy, like making them a snack, sending them nice text messages, showing random non-sexual physical affection, or doing one of their chores for them, all unprompted. Arguably, you could say that you are starting to no longer care about their happiness. Story 2. Not enjoying spending time with your partner. Feeling irritated by your partner's presence, quirks, and habits. Losing interest in what is going on in your partner's life. Story 3. Having a sense of dread about them. You dread having to spend time with them. You dread getting a text from them. You dread having to talk to them or call them or saying I love you to them. You may not notice it, but it's been a long time since you've initiated anything. You might also have someone else in mind that you'd rather tell first whenever you have something to talk about or something to do. You're watching the clock for when you get to leave, and you never linger even a little once time is up. There's no lovey-dovey goodbyes, you're already off and running. You tell them you fell asleep very often. This is not an accidental once or twice. This is on purpose, whenever you miss or ignore their texts or calls. The future looks bleak with them. The future looks better alone. You don't want to work things out. There isn't anything to work out because really you just don't like them. You might have more frequent arguments, but oddly, this is the one thing I'd say varies between couples when one or both fall out of love. Things that matter to them don't take up space in your mind anymore. Forgetting their birthday, forgetting plans you made together, forgetting to tell them stuff that's happening in your life. When they're talking to you, it's easy for you to space out, miss what they're saying, and overall be generally disengaged. You might even walk away from them by accident because you're not thinking of checking if they're still behind you or not. Anyway, to anyone falling out of love, I recommend you break up quickly once you feel certain you no longer want to have that relationship. It's hard for the person to watch you slip away like this if they still like you. I'll also make it a point to mention that I've been the person who watched someone slip away and have been the person who has slipped away from other people. You just have to work up the strength and end it clearly without mincing words, because it'll blow up eventually. It's never easy to tell someone they're not right for you, but it must be done. If you want something to be over, then the responsibility is on you to end it. The only time you may be able to get away with not doing anything is if your partner is also slipping away from you and not texting, calling, or reaching out at all. That's rare, but if it happens, you can either let it fade or send a quick text after a while to clarify it's done. Story 4. I just want to add that a healthy, long-term relationship can go through cycles where your feelings wax and wane, sometimes with different feelings moving in different directions. Don't immediately assume your love is diminishing because believe me, it can come roaring back even stronger after a period of less interest. Being appreciative makes life worthwhile, but oftentimes, it is impossible to hold that view 24/7. Sometimes you have to get a bit lost in the weeds before understanding the true value of what you have. Story 5. Here are some signs I felt with my ex when we were still together. I don't enjoy spending time with him. We stopped sharing and caring about each other's lives. My physical attraction fades. I feel emotionally distant, and I compare our relationship to others. Story 6. Coming home is no longer a pleasant feeling. You are coming back from work or errands, but you delay your return home, preferring to stop somewhere first, or sitting in your car a couple of blocks away, psychologically preparing yourself for entering the house. You are at home, and you hear the car pull up in the driveway or the keys in the door, and you think, oh no. Story 7. You stop sharing anything about yourself or your day because you do not want them to know anything about you anymore. You cherish time away from them. You dread being with them. Everything about them annoys you. You do not want to be intimate with them anymore. You do anything to pacify them or get them to leave you alone. You busy yourself with work, chores, childcare, or other reasonable responsibilities that keep you away from them. You feel complete indifference to their existence. Story 8. Even though I loved and cared for them, I dreaded seeing them and I began to resent them. I should have left way sooner, and it was mean of me to stay and try to make it work for so long. I was very angry at things they did early on, but it was the best relationship I've had, so I made excuses to stay. Story 9. I can't stand the sight of him. It happened when I overheard him bad-mouthing me to my doctor when I was admitted to the emergency room with a near-death illness. I never got over it because it was a deep betrayal that I never expected. Now I know who he really is. There were so many other things along the way that I overlooked, but this was the end. Story 10. You might be falling out of love if you feel emotionally distant, avoid physical affection, get easily irritated, or prefer spending time alone. If you're fantasizing about being single or struggling to see a future together, it could be a sign the relationship is losing its spark. Story 11. You stop going to bed together. People do it so they can have quiet time to themselves. It can be normal, but it can also be an escape for a person to catch their breath. Story 12. Work becomes more fun than home. Home feels like a drag, and you resent your partner for being so negative all the time and denying any issues on their end. I hope he keeps draining his own life. Story 13. When you can't believe how long it takes them to tell a simple story from their day at work. So then Judy, she's the one whose sister's neighbor had that cute cactus statue in her backyard before it was ruined by a trick-or-treater. Or was it a loose dog? No, I'm pretty sure that it was the trick-or-treater. Story 14. You might start feeling indifferent about spending time together, find yourself frequently annoyed by minor things, or realize you're no longer excited about future plans as a couple. Story 15. If I have to remind myself to pay attention to them. When I'm in love, I think of them even when they are not present, and I have no difficulty at all in paying attention to them. Story 16. I saw something once that resonated with me, which was the car test. When you get home and see your partner's car in the driveway, do you feel happy or not? Just for the record, I like seeing my partner's car in the driveway. Story 17. Love is not a feeling. This idea of being in love is the modern era's greatest lie. Love is a choice. It's a choice to respect, honor, and be dutiful to someone even when it is not convenient, even if it is difficult. Lust and desire are feelings you can fall out of. Love is a choice, and giving up on someone is a choice, not because you fell out of something. Every couple I have talked to that had lifelong marriages always said the same thing. There are long stretches in any committed relationship where it is stale, stagnant, and sometimes even downright unpleasant. But it is the choice to stay and the choice to figure out how to rekindle the relationship that is the most important thing. Abuse and affairs are different. That is always the retort. Those two things effectively relieve the other person in the relationship of any duty to even try. But short of those two things, if you are committing to loving someone, you do it even when you do not feel like doing it. If you are not willing to do it, then you do not fall out of love. You made a choice to no longer commit to the person. Story 18. When you can't pretend to care about things they like but you have no interest in. Like if he likes cars, you can't even pretend to be interested when he talks about them. Story 19. Our couples counselor told us he knew we would make it through because when either of us got emotional, we reached for each other. So, I guess if you don't do that anymore. Story 20. I may notice a decline in her desire to hug, kiss, or touch my partner. Physical closeness that once felt natural might now feel forced or uncomfortable. Story 21. I am very much a giver, but the second it's not reciprocated, I'm out. I'm not talking about a 100% all give and take all the time, but you can easily notice when it's 80/30 or 90/10. Story 22. Nervously checks marriage. Yes, we're fine. I'm glad all of you got out of your bad relationships. I had to think back to my girlfriend before my wife 25 years ago for this question. It was exactly as a lot of you said. I started to dislike going home. I made excuses to stay out longer. And when I was home, I felt annoyed by her presence, etc. I was sad when I broke up with her, but I knew it was the right thing. We both did. We had a good cry together. We were together for almost 3 years, then went out for pizza and enjoyed each other's company for the first time in a long time because we were both ready to move on. My wife now, I called her at work today to tell her what silly thing our little booger of a puppy did this morning, and we had a good laugh about it. Story 23. There are a few common signs. You never close your eyes anymore when you kiss their lips. There's no tenderness right before in your fingertips. There's no welcome look in your eyes when they reach for you. You're starting to criticize little things they do. Story 24. You might start feeling less excited about spending time together, find yourself daydreaming about life without them, or feel a lack of emotional connection. Story 25. When you start to be annoyed by small things they do that didn't used to bother you, I'm not talking about things that are big enough to warrant a discussion to fix, but simple things. I hope that makes sense, as I can't think of one for an example. Story 26. When I stopped caring about showing any form of physical intimacy to her or receiving any from her, I stopped hugging, kissing, and cuddling, going days without physically touching her. It wasn't even a conscious decision. I just couldn't love her anymore. Story 27. If old conflicts or grievances are surfacing more often and you're struggling to move past them, it might indicate underlying dissatisfaction. When you find yourself thinking more about your own needs and desires rather than considering how your partner fits into your life, it might be a sign of growing distance. Story 28. You are just not interested or excited to be around them or do things with them anymore. Things you once found enjoyable with them start to seem like a chore. Your brain switches off and you just go through the motions to please them or maintain the status quo. You start feeling guilty out of nowhere because whatever you are reciprocating doesn't feel genuine anymore. That is when you know. Story 29. Meeting someone nice and thinking they would be a better fit for your partner than you are. Inviting more and more people over all the time so you don't have to be alone with them. Traveling solo as often as possible. Not caring when they make dumb financial mistakes because you subconsciously know you won't be there. Not wanting to touch. Story 30. You don't innately want to do things for them, even minor things you know they will like. It means you're harboring some resentment, possibly subconsciously. Story 31. No productive arguing or no arguing at all. My wife and I have always bickered, but it's how we roll. The fire is there. If that ever stops, we'll be in trouble. Story 32. When the person you're with doesn't make you feel safe, genuinely happy, graced by their presence, or gives you bad anxiety or pressure, meaning you've been with them for a long time but you feel negative around them constantly. Story 33. When spending time or talking to them starts to seem like a chore, when you find the predominant emotions in your mind are suffocation, anxiety, guilt, and emptiness. Story 34. About this question, I want to say lately I've noticed that my enthusiasm for spending time with my partner has diminished, and I find myself getting more irritated by things that didn't bother me before. I tend to avoid deep conversations and feel increasingly emotionally distant. Sometimes, I'm surprised to realize I'm not as drawn to my partner's positive traits as I used to be. This is exactly the right moment for me to hear this, as it's what I'm currently experiencing. I don't know if someone is living this same situation. Story 35. Hear me out. Falling out of love isn't a thing. Love is an act. It's a decision. Maybe people decide they don't want to give or receive love from someone anymore. And there are all sorts of valid reasons for that. But I believe you can always choose to love someone. This is from someone who lived through these devastating feelings and learned the importance of choosing to love and asking for love in return. All these years later, it's not perfect, but there's no doubt we are in love. Story 36. When I find myself feeling indifferent or frustrated more often, sometimes I also might notice that I am not as excited about their achievements or well-being. Story 37. For me, I lost the physical attraction. We are 13 years into our marriage, and the spark went out about 4 years back. I have also lost all interest in sex. It is a chore to be avoided now. Yet, I still love him and find comfort in his presence in my life. He is a good man and he adores me. Story 38. From the opposite end of the spectrum, as someone who realized they were no longer loved, was when my victories no longer became our victories. Her victories were always my victories, but my victories never mattered. There was a day, and yes, I assure you, a single day where I made $8,000. I ended up making over $30,000 that month. It was the height of everything I had been working for to provide her and our future family the life I felt they deserved. I was so excited to share it with her. I was excited to say, "We're no longer in debt. We've made it." Her response, "That's great," in a monotoned, completely uncaring way. I thought she would be jumping with happiness. I was wrong. She didn't love me anymore, and that was the moment I knew for sure that she didn't. Story 39. You do not want to listen to the little things anymore. Like, look what I found. What's that outside the window? Or other side notes you just do not care about anymore. Story 40. As always, the opposite of love is not hate. It is apathy. It's like they could break up with you in the most diabolical fashion, and you just don't care anymore. You wouldn't care if they're seeing 20 different people every day. Story 41. When you lose the energy to confront the challenges that need confronting, I spent way too long on my last relationship. It got to the point where the same arguments kept repeating. Arguments are a part of any relationship, but once they get to a point where you don't even want to speak to them or feel relief when they give you the silent treatment, it's time to call it quits.